Yeah, for 5 minutes or so.
You just want to unplug me, or
Yeah, unplug you. And, yeah. Thank you. ايه هو دلوقتي مفتاح مع شادي. لا استنى كده، استنى امسك. Should we start, guys, by a short prayer? Yeah. Yeah, we'll try to get into Aussie style. Richard, Franco, excuse us to start with a short prayer. Yeah, thank you very much. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen.
Heavenly Father, we come before you in the name of our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, because in His name everything is yes. We pray that, Lord, this evening would be edifying to all of us. It would be a growth in knowledge and in us understanding your word more and getting closer to you in humble obedience to you. Hear us through the intercessions and prayers of all the saints when we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming here tonight. It's a great honor to have you. I was expecting more turnout, but I think it is good enough to have fun and to share the Word of God and our knowledge about that. It's a unique seminar that we are holding today about the rise of Homo sapien, which is us. It's a big word, but it's basically humans. And there are so many differences or different views regarding the rise of Homo sapien. Today we are going to check on two views. We should have started at 7, but we're gonna catch up quickly. This is the program. Now I'm supposed to do a bit of an introduction and housekeeping. Then Michael will present his presentation on the rise of Homo sapiens. Then we'll have a Q&A session 1. And then I will deal briefly with the anthropology in the Bible, and the word teaser there does not mean anything bad. It means just a brief talk. There is no teasing between any of us. It is just, it's a huge topic in the Bible, and we could go for hours and hours talking about anthropology in the Bible. So for the sake of your time, I will only go for 20 minutes and then followed by Q&A. And after that, we will conclude the night with prayer, and then we will share blocking the camera, and we will share after that some refreshments outside. So before we start, I should acknowledge the traditional owners of this country that we are standing on today, and honor in particular the elders past and present, and we pray for the prosperity of the Noongar people that live in Perth. In case of emergency, we normally adopt one entry, one exit policy. So there is the exit outside. I hope there is nothing that would make us get into an emergency. Toilet is just outside the building, and as I said about the refreshments after dinner. We have got a bonus. Michael generously has got a display of some artifacts, books, and fossils, and I've got a display on some posters and books as well. We are going to go through that during and after the talk. And Michael actually is a petroleum geophysicist. One of his hobbies is anthropology. I am a geologist, and one of my hobbies is anthropology. So none of us is specialized in this field, but I think Michael has got a huge understanding and experience in this area because he traveled the world, collected artifacts from all over the world. He is graduated in mathematics, makes it him even non-anthropological at all. But he's very smart and intelligent. And that was from the New England many years ago, I would say a couple of centuries. In his journey of professionalism, he is working as a petroleum geophysicist, explorationist, and lived and worked in many countries all over the world. Basically in Australia, Southeast Asia, North Africa, South America, and North America. He's got vast knowledge of geography, environment, and culture, and of course that would lead him in being interested in anthropology. In this role, he has, I think I covered this, and I would recommend that he would start his own museum. So, and we can come and pay you some fees to look at your collection. Respectfully, he's going to talk about billions of years, so don't be offended, because I do not believe in billions of years. I believe in 6 days, 6,000 years ago, and through the presentations, we are going to respect each other's views, because both of us have got the dignity and the respect for each other. So I will hand the microphone now to Michael while you are putting your hands together for him. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Father. Do I need this or you can hear me? I think we did it for the live stream. Oh, okay. Get my little, I gotta plug myself back in. Okay, as Father just intimated to you all, I've been working all over the world as a petroleum geophysicist, so in that role I've managed to see lots of different areas and picked up a bunch of fossils and artefacts and curios from around the world, and then once I retired, I had time to sort of delve into a little bit what did some of these artefacts really mean. So it's really attempting anthropology, no more than that. And so if we can get this to work here. Oh, I should turn this on, I suppose. Maybe work. There we go. Okay, so how it all began. Current scientific thinking is that some about 13.7 billion years ago, our universe, was formed, and that not just means our galaxy that we live in, the Milky Way, but lots of other billions of other galaxies as well. And even within our Milky Way, there are billions of suns. You look up there in the stars at night, you can see about, probably they say 7,000 to 8,000 stars in the night, but actually there are billions of them, just the same as our sun. And so it's highly probable that there are other planets zipping around some of those suns, and probably highly likely that they're very well, statistically, it's almost certain that there would be life out there on some of these other suns, not just necessarily in our galaxy, but in all the other galaxies as well. So, and the current thinking is that about 13.7 billion years ago, our galaxy was formed from the Big Bang theory, as it's referred to. And so if you think about the Big Bang theory, it wasn't that there was a tiny little minuscule piece of something that suddenly exploded hanging in the universe, hanging in space, because there was no space. So that was one of the big mysteries of how the universe formed. Where did it come from? And is it a progression of other universes? And now the astrophysicists that look at all this, they believe that not just one universe, but there's probably it's now referred to as a multiverse, and you've got string theory and a whole swag of other things, and what do they call it, a series of parallel universes, and probably when these parallel universes may have touched each other, that was a big bang. So that's one theory that they're working on at the moment. But anyway, that's way out of our field. But after the 13.7 billion years of the formation of the overall universe, about some 4.56 billion years ago, a suite of coalescing gases formed our solar system. That was our sun. And then what was left over from our sun, the remnant bits ultimately amalgamated together by gravity to form the planets that we now have. So that's our solar system that started about 4.56 billion years ago on current thinking. And there are some very old rocks around the world, some in Greenland, I think, some in Canada, and some here in Australia. In fact, this particular rock is called the Jack Hills, up at Jack Hills from the Narrow Gneiss, and multi-phase metamorphism, but it does contain some zircons in there. Zircons are really tough little beasties that survive for long, long times. And based on some of the radiometric dating that they now use of uranium decaying to lead, they're able to age these zircons and other other rocks around where they have uranium transferring to lead. And the current thinking, or the work that's been done on this Jack Hills gneiss, which comes in around about here at about 4.4 billion years ago. So you got the Big Bang happened here. Our Earth was formed, or our universe was, not universe, sorry, our solar system was formed. Around about very close after that, a huge meteorite supposedly hit our Earth and blew a huge amount of that sediment, or that formation, into the atmosphere, which coalesced again to become our moon. And that moon is very important to our survival, because if we didn't have it, our Earth would wobble a lot and we probably would be flung off into space. So there's numerous miraculous type events that have happened in the existence of our solar system and our Earth as to why we're here today. And anyway, so that piece of that Jack Hills narrow limestone is over there, which contains those zircons. And then the next really famous thing that happened, so you got this, what they call the Archaic period, goes all the way through here, where we had no evidence of life. And here at the Proterozoic, what's referred to in geological terms, the Proterozoic, which really means early life, and then up here to the Phanerozoic. Phanerozoic means visible life. And so they believed that life existed in here in very, very primitive forms. But, and the conventional thinking up until very recently was that we couldn't have life without oxygen. But they've now found that in more recent few decades, they found that to be totally untrue, because when they discovered some of these deep sea vents in the ocean that are spewing huge volumes of water back into the ocean, and all the very hot water, 1,000 degrees C, pouring into an ocean that's got like about 1 or 2 degrees C in the ocean floor, and there's a whole plethora of life living there with no oxygen, no light, and they're really living off sulfur dioxide. And so we had plenty of sulfur dioxide back in this period, so the more they delve into it, the more they think that life probably happened on our Earth, very, very close to the formation of our Earth. There was some forms of life, but very, very primitive, unicellulars, etc. But in around about here, we come to the stromatolites, and they were the first. They're a series of bacteria, basically, that grew in these warm saline waters, and they get covered with and photosynthesis. They took over photosynthesis, so they were able to suck CO2 out of the water and emit oxygen, and that started to put oxygen into the atmosphere, because prior to that time there was no oxygen in the atmosphere, and earlier scientists said, well, there couldn't be any life without oxygen, but of course now we know that's not true. So the Proterozoic really starts around about when a rise in atmospheric oxygen, so that's why they called it early life, that they thought life happened then. But then this went on for, as you can see, from about, 2.3 billion years up to about way less, about 600 million years ago, a huge, long time. But then suddenly in an area we call the Cambrian, they had this massive explosion of life that we found in fossils. And there's a picture there of a trilobite, and I have a trilobite fossil over there that you can have a look at. And so that's the first emphasis we have, that went from like unicellular to multicellular animals with a hard skeleton, an exoskeleton. But of course, whatever life existed back in here, we've got almost no fossil record of it, because there was no hard parts, they were all soft, so they all just disintegrated. And then we've got Phanerozoic, which comes right through to where we are today up here. So the stromatolites, which exist up at Shark Bay, which they're basically referred to as living fossils. And I'm told that, although I've been there, I'm told that if you look carefully, you can see bubbles of oxygen coming up off the sides of these series of mats of stromatolites. So moving on. So oxygen came in there, and that was where we called early life. So given just a pictorial time chart, it's not to scale, because if it was to the scale, it'd be way up through the roof there for hundreds of metres to get to us right at the top. So the earliest life that we find, apart from the bacteria and the algae sitting in here, in South Australia, down in an area called, near a mine called the Edicarian, there was an Australian geologist there, his name slips in mind. Sprigg, that's right, George Sprigg? Reg Sprigg, yeah. He found these fossils there in the Flinders Ranges, and no one believed that they were fossils. He had hell's own job getting people to believe. He thought they were just marks on the rocks. But of course now it's a massive industry out there, with various scientists out there digging up fossils all over the place. They're finding fossil sponges, etc., etc., etc. So that area is now, or that time back in the Proterozoic, as I mentioned to you before, is called the Edicarian, because that's about, up to over 1 billion years ago, up in that time there. So then we get into the Paleozoic, which means old life, Mesozoic, middle life. Middle life, and then recent life. And there's lots of different geological time frames that's broken up into. And you can see in this pictorial representation of geology as we understand it, you've got this general progression from unicellular animals down here into the first hard exoskeletons that we're able to get fossils from. That's the Cambrian explosion that I referred to. And then you build up through Silurian. The Devonian is referred to as the age of the fishes. The Mississippian Pennsylvanian is where trees really started to grow, when life started to grow out on Earth, and again put a massive amount of oxygen into the atmosphere. Took oxygen out of the atmosphere, and took also put oxygen into the atmosphere, took CO2 out of the atmosphere, and so on up through into the Triassic, the Jurassic, the dinosaurs, and then as far as we're concerned, the big mystery is this TK boundary, or the Triassic Cretaceous boundary, the TK boundary. That's when we now know that 70% of life extinguished at that time. And it's traced to a massive meteorite impact on the Yucatan Peninsula in the Gulf of Mexico, which took out 70% of life on Earth, including all the dinosaurs, bang in one. There's some stories that said the dinosaurs were slowly dying out, but that's not been proven by any of the research that's done. And after that time, mammals survived, because mammals at that stage were tiny little animals. They basically lived under the ground, etc. So when this massive meteorite impact hit and caused massive fires all over the globe, massive tidal waves, etc., the few animals that survived were mammals, and hence that's why we're here. If that impact hadn't happened, we might have ended up being smart dinosaurs, but anyway, we're here as smart mammals, etc. And so hence you go through all the various mammalian ages, and apes come in here about 0.5 million years ago, 1.5 million years ago, and hence up to us up here in the Holocene, Homo sapiens and Anthropocene, right up here. We come in there. So we don't really know what caused all these extinctions, but we see it in the fossil record. And the big one, of course, being down here at the Permian, which was a 95% extinction across that boundary. So practically all life on Earth disappeared at that time, and then blossomed after that into the dinosaurs, etc. So anyway, that's just a quick little run through of how we get here. And then we get to sort of the mystery or the miracle of life. Back in '53, there's a couple of smart cookies over there at the University of Chicago. They connected up some gases, methane, nitrogen and H2S, etc., and joined them up with some water, and they fired off some electrical sparks, e.g. lightning, and they came produced a frothy broth of amino acids, fatty acids and sugars. And so everyone threw their hands in the air and, hooray, we found the origin of life. This is how life happened. But hang on a fella, that's not quite so. But because it's not really amino acids that are life, it is proteins that are life. And proteins are made up of amino acids. So while they were able to produce the amino acids, or find the amino acids, they'd never been able to make proteins. And so proteins are these building blocks of life, and there are over some 200,000 in our bodies, and of some 10 billion cells or something in our bodies. But anyway, but these amino acids must be strung together in a very, very specific order. And if they're not put together in that order, you don't have a protein. And there's lots of proteins in our body. And just for the chances of a simple 200 long amino acid protein of 20 simple amino acids, if you can try to connect them randomly, the mathematical chance of that happening is like 1 in 10 to the 260, a humongous number that's probably bigger than all the atoms in the universe. So it's basically impossible, mathematically anyway, that these proteins could have formed, and that's a simple protein compared to some of the ones. So statistically, there's a zero chance. Statistically, there's a zero chance that that these proteins could have formed randomly, and proteins cannot reproduce. For that, they need RNA and DNA. Now, DNA is you've probably all heard of DNA, but it's the sequence that's your building, that tells your cells how to grow and what to be in life. But the DNA itself is dead. It's got nothing. It needs a protein called, oops, I'm going the wrong way. It needs another protein called RNA to interpret what's written in the DNA. And the DNA only consists of 4 amino acids. I think we've got A, T, D, C. I just forget what it goes now. But and together they are life. And so they need a membrane to enclose it, and then they can reproduce. In fact, when your mother and father each supplied an ovum and a sperm to you and became one cell, and that cell divided, and that cell can only divide, so suddenly you had, 2 half cells combined to make one cell, and that combination of the DNA together makes you what you are today. So together they are life, independently they are dead. Now this DNA double helix is about 2 metres long, and every cell in your body has that 2 metre length of DNA in it. If you joined all that DNA, the helixes together, you would go all the way from here to the moon and back again several times. So you just think, within your body, you've got this, every cell has this 2 metre long DNA string in it, which consists of all these, only 4 proteins, and that the combinations of all those 4 proteins become all life on Earth, whether it's plant, an animal, or whatever, they control the life. And there are 10,000 trillion cells in our bodies, and each is only about 10 microns wide. That's 1/200,000th of a centimetre or something, I just forget now. And typically a cell will contain something like 20,000 different types of proteins inside that cell, all flying around, really busy, looking to make you what you are. And they manage every aspect of your being while you are alive. But the instant you are dead, then they no longer work for you, they work for themselves, and they're gone off in all directions. So another interesting facet is that most cells die within a month and are generally replaced. Usually as the cell dies, another one takes its place. And this is all written in the DNA as to how the cells reform, whether a cell becomes a bit of an eyebrow or a little bit of a stomach or a little bit of a kidney or whatever it is, a cell within that's all controlled by that DNA double helix. And however, brain cells don't reproduce. You only get 100 billion at birth, and they die off at about 500 per hour. So if you're interested in doing some heavy thinking, do it now, because you're losing it as it goes on. So anyway, that's just a little snippet about life. So talking a little bit, go back a little bit about geology. It took off in the late 1700s and early 1800s, and all sciences in those days were done by the landed gentry. They didn't have to work every day to produce food or get enough to eat. They lived on estates or whatever, and they were wealthy, so hence they could go out and do things. And the first geology took off like in about the late 1700s, and Hutton was the first guy who started to look at geology of the Earth. And one of the first things he realised is that some rocks were older than others, and the younger rocks must sit on top of older rocks, etc., which seems very simple to us today, but it was a massive breakthrough in those days. But to try and read Hutton, it's impossible. I mean, to say, it's just, you can't understand a word of it. But someone did interpret, I forget the guy's name now, who did rewrite his theory, basically, which was understandable. But then Lyell came in the 1810s or 20s or something or other, and he was the first one that really put geology together as a science. And he was the one that basically set all geological thinking, which became very famous throughout the world at that time. And so these early geologists realised that some rocks were older than others were younger, but they were not all the same age. That was like they were not all created in one bang. So if you believe in creation. Okay, so originally he just gave 4 ages to his things: primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary. And later they became all different names, of course, but we still use the term tertiary. And so he always realised that these rocks were very old, but the big question was how old. We had no real way of knowing how old they were. And then Charles Darwin he came out with The Origin of the Species. You've probably heard of Darwin, he sailed on the Beagle, and it was when he was in the Galapagos Islands because the Galapagos Islands are a series of volcanic islands that grow from a volcanic hotspot, and they get younger to the south as you go progressively south. And he saw in the progression in the islands that the same species of bird, primarily birds, but other animals and plants too, and they varied from island to island as they got there. Their physical features changed even though they were the same, and that's when he started thinking about, is there a progression in life or an evolution? And so he came back after the voyage on the Beagle. His family were very, very religious. He realised that this would cause all sorts of complications for the religion which ruled the world at that stage. I mean, say everyone was highly religious, and so they all believed in a very simple the church taught a very simple life, that you had heaven up there, you had earth here, and you had hell down there, you know. And when he came out with this Origin of Species, that we progressed from apes primarily, but earlier animals. Although he never said that in his original book, The Origin of the Species, but he did publish a book later called The Descent of Man, which he went into that. In Origin of Species, he only actually mentioned once, right on the last page or the second last page, that maybe this same progression of life or this evolution of life to more complex life forms, you know, possibly applied to humans as well. And Alfred Wallace, he was a guy who had been, again, collecting specimens in South America, and he tweaked to the fact that there probably was a progression of life as he saw it in Brazil through, and on his return to England, his ship caught fire and all his specimens were burnt, so he lost everything and his writings and everything. So then he headed off to Indonesia and started again. And he went down through the Indonesian archipelago, and he saw the same thing happening there, that there was this progression of life. And hence, he did talk with Darwin, and although Darwin didn't publish his books for 20 years, he put it away in a drawer and wasn't game to publish it because he knew the uproar it would cause amongst the religious fraternity, etc., etc. And when he did publish, he and Wallace both were read at the same not the geological side, the Royal Society. I think both their papers were read at the same time, and they both tweaked it. But Wallace always said that Darwin was the really understood this evolution of life. And current thinking of like going to the Bible sort of thing, or the origin of the Bible. Most biblical scholars believe that the Bible came in at about the 6th century BC. It was no older than the 6th century BC. But however, there's been some recent discoveries of a primitive Hebrew text which they date at the 10th century BC, and this is the text there. Hebrew is a very primitive language, and this was even more primitive than that, but they're able to translate some of this, or they figure they can, and they date it at the 10th century BC. So it could possibly have been that the Bible could be that old at the 10th century rather than the 6th century BC. And another interesting one was that this Irish guy, Bishop Ussher, in 1650, he calculated the biblical lineage of all the kings and whatever back through the Bible, and he came up that Earth was created on the 23rd of October 4004 BC. So he was very specific that he got it right down to the day. And he claimed it was 5,600 years old. But fossils and extinctions indicate that that is not really the case, that life is much, much older than that. And C14 dating, carbon dating, is really only good for about 20,000 years, but now we have this radiometric dating that is very, very accurate, accepted by pretty well all scientists everywhere, and it basically says billions, and I've already spoken to you about the billions of the origin here. There may be the odd one who's not very smart, but that's another story. Okay. So let's get back to the split of it.
Do you know how many people descended from, how many scientists descended from Darwinism recently?
From the where?
Darwinism?
Oh, Darwinism?
Yeah.
How do you mean how many scientists descended from Darwinism?
Distanced themselves from
Darwinism
and wrote petitions against Darwinism and the science.
Oh, yeah. I'll talk about some of
them.
them.
Smart people.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I'll talk about some of them.
Only the non-smart people believe still in Darwinism.
I don't think you can deny that you have a general progression from very primitive life through to a very complex life to us at the end of that very complex life. Now, what happened along the way, whether God was out there putting his finger in the pile along the way to change things a bit, that may well have been the case, but we don't know that that was the case. But anyway, going back to apes and hominins. The big split between apes and the train that led to us happened about 5 million years ago. And so you've got apes that lived in the trees to where you got walkers. The Australopithecines were basically walkers. And they think that's possibly to do with the closing of the Isthmus of Panama with North and South America, altered the ocean currents, and so Africa, then which had been basically a jungle, very fervent jungle environment at that time, became an open savanna type area. And so it may be not so much that the Australopithecines came down out of the trees, but maybe the trees disappeared and left them on the ground. And so you've got these various branches, etc., and as they find more and more fossils, these branches change all the time. But you've got Australopithecines all the way through here, which are certainly way more ape-like. And then you've got Homo habilis, which is the first one that's sort of given the name of Homo or man. And he was the first one that used tools. And so Homo sort of starts here and goes through, and there's a whole suite of branches of Homo that are going through there. And some of the features of this hominin lineage is bipedalism, of course, became a very useful trait. If you're on the ground, to be able to, if you had monkey feet, it wasn't very good for walking, etc. So the feet changed, they became taller. Being tall had an advantage where they could see danger coming, etc. Encephalization, enlargement of the brain. They started to use tools, and the tooth morphology changed as the chimps, of course, eat mostly nuts and leaves and bark, etc. So they had a totally different dentition to the Australopithecines. They had a bit of a variation because they started eating meat, the Australopithecines there, because the trees and all the food that they had previously got from the trees had disappeared, so they had to pick up what they could on the ground, so they started eating meat as well as, and even chimps today do hunt in packs and will kill other animals, and especially other chimps who are trying to invade, and they will eat them. So it's not all that uncommon even in the chimps. Exactly.
So this is an interpretation.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas in the Bible, we actually have observations that are recorded by eyewitnesses. So that are reliable and truthful.
Well, that's if you believe the Bible is reliable and truthful. I mean, so it's a book. Someone just wrote a book, okay.
And some of them are artistic display as well. So you get like a lower jaw of an animal, and you give it to an artist and ask him to make like a gorilla-shaped image. So it's just an artistic display.
There's arguments for that case.
Lots of fairy tale much are presenting actually.
It could well be the case, but we
It's just artist's imagination. All the hair and all that is just artistic.
yeah, well,
Artistic impression. And how would you produce a 46 intelligent, smart person? Of course, I mean a person with 46 chromosomes from a 48 chromosome ape.
it's a mutation. We don't
Mutation. If it is mutation, we can do it in the lab.
not necessarily. What causes mutations? We believe it's cosmic rays.
We can do mutation in the lab now.
In some respects, but not what you'd call very definitive to be able to create a new species. We've never been able to create a new species, no matter
Why
what
we are
mutation.
creating new stories?
Pardon?
Why we are creating stories if we cannot?
I'm not creating a story. I'm just telling you factual information.
No,
That
it's not factual. It's interpretation.
well, it's an interpretation based on very factual evidence.
Lower show for a chip.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're the experts, not me, not you. I mean, so,
So how did they talk? How did they come to talk like
well, language never came in, well, they don't think language came into about 12,000 years ago. It's very recent. In fact, chimps and Australopithecines probably can't talk because they're vocal boxes, because they had their head down like this and were knuckle draggers. They could only make grunts and sounds. It was only when you got to Homo erectus, this guy here, that where he stood erect, that all of the voice box in the throat to where you could make different sounds and talk. You know. So, you know, the chimps don't talk, but well, they communicate with each other with grunts and I guess etc. etc. You know, so he probably was not all that much different. But anyway, trying to move on. But you know, I just showed a picture of the change in the dentition there between from chimps to Australopithecines to Homo. You know, it's quite distinct. You can see he chewed on nuts and bark and sticks. He's got sort of cutting teeth in the front. He started to chew on, probably get some meat. And here we eat both meat and vegetables, etc. You know, so it's a changing thing. So the rise of hominids. Okay, so we've got Australopithecus, which I spoke to you there before, which are the earliest bipedalism. Homo habilis, this guy in the middle here, he was the first one to probably make stone tools. And I've got some stone tools over there that may not relate as old as him, but we're younger than him. And then Homo erectus, his brain got quite a bit bigger about 1.5 million years ago. He started to use fire and cooking, etc., so he progressed. And then you get into the various European branches, Neanderthalensis and Heidelbergensis, etc., and these are all different fossils that they found that are different from each other, and so there's no nice clear lineage that just runs down. There's a whole suite of branches that went off in different ways and they died out, etc., etc. And I'll talk about Neanderthalensis, how he died out in a short while, and why he died out we don't know, because he should have been very adapted. He's very close to us. In fact, we have 10% Neanderthal genes in our system. We've got the Neanderthals. In fact, again, to digress a little bit, the Neanderthal comes from Neander Valley in Germany, and the village that was there, they were mining, the people in the village were mining limestone and taking it into the local village to develop into, I guess, cement or something or other. And in the mud layers that overlaid this limestone, the workers found this skull there, and they thought it was a human skull because it was so similar to ours. And they thought there'd been a murder committed or something like that, so they got in touch with the local authorities, and that's where Neanderthalensis took off from there, from the Neander Valley in Germany. But anyway, I said the Isthmus of Panama closed, so Africa, we probably got, our ancestors got left in the ground. Homo erectus left Africa about 1 million years before present. He entered Europe about he lived around the Middle East first, then he went to about 100,000 years ago. And then there's varied forms of Homo erectus, and there's a very indistinct separation between erectus and Neanderthals, etc. And it's not really sure, but you've got Cro-Magnon, which is a very smart man in the part of France, the southern part of France. And then the Neanderthals are very similar to us, but they went extinct about 40,000 years ago, and we don't really know why. And that was in the middle of an ice age, and I'll show you that again. It could well have been.
The similarity here in the brain as well. The similarity in the brain.
Yeah, well, you see, there's quite a similar brain.
Yeah.
It's not highly distinctive.
The size of the skull, because brains are not quite.
Yeah, well, you've got
the size of the skull.
yeah. But which grew first, the skull or the brain?
Whether the early species has got the frontal loop or not, it's very questionable.
Oh, sure. It's not clear-cut science. In fact, all the
science at all. It's not a story.
there we beg to differ. But anyway, brain size is not necessarily, you know, the be-all and end-all of being smarter, but certainly Homo erectus or Homo sapiens brains are far more convoluted. They've got more. No, I don't go into the nervous system, but anyway, so Homo sapiens left Africa about 120,000, probably at least 100,000 years ago, and they spread east and west, whereas Neanderthalensis didn't really spread east and west. He basically just went into Europe. And we coexisted with the Neanderthals, or our sapiens did, with the Neanderthals for several tens of thousands of years. And we also interbred, probably, because we have 10% Neanderthal genes, supposedly, in our system.
May I ask a question here, please?
Yeah.
Go back to the previous slide. What is the fossil pool of each?
Very, very poor.
Very poor.
Yeah.
And what's interpretation from very poor fossil
Yeah.
collections?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm saying you've got the fossils that came out of Africa, there's numerous ones of them now, in the 40s and 50s you could have put them in a little box. But now they've found a lot more in lots of different, you've got, Lucy in Africa, and you've got Takana Man, and you've got several of them around.
What do you think variation within the species and certain diseases could have affected those fossils as well? So dwarfism, gigantism, arthritis, all that kind of stuff would have affected the shapes of the skulls and the shapes of the skeleton?
I don't know if I'd go that far. It's possible. But I don't know. Anyway, moving on. So basically we have the Australopithecines and Homo coming out of Africa, going all the way down to Australia, going up through Europe, and probably across into North America, across the north there, and then it's also the argument that they came out of Asia across into America from across the area between Russia and I forget the name of that. I guess there was a talk that was originally where they thought they came across, but now they're beginning to think that they really came across here in the ice ages across into North America. But anyway,
This is which species?
Homo sapiens.
That was 60,000 years ago.
Well, they came out of Africa 100,000 years ago.
Okay. What was the shape of the world 100,000 years ago?
Very similar to that.
You think so? Yeah. No tectonics, no continental drifts, nothing?
Well, the continental drift and plate tectonics, I mean to say that's taken place over millions of years, not in the last 100. Well, it's still happening, but it's not.
So we have here many local evolution of humans. If this is the case, because you said that there are previous ancestry that was few million years ago. So those fossils were also found in Africa and South America and Asia. So why Homo sapiens, early Homo sapiens, came from Asia, from Africa,
Well, we see no.
invaded the world? Why do we don't see the others invading the world?
Well, no other fossils older than sapiens have been found anywhere else in these other places, in the Americas or in South America or in Asia, etc. So, and we'll talk about mitochondrial DNA in a minute, because from mitochondrial DNA they are able to trace it back to Africa. And mitochondrial DNA only exists in the female, and they're able to trace it, and it's separate it's distinct from normal DNA, and they're able to look at the mutations going back through, and it's pretty commonly accepted that all Homo came out of Africa. Same as like most animals came out of Africa. Yeah, we have 99% the same DNA, and we eat it very.
You know that we and the banana share 50% of our DNA?
Very common.
So
That string of DNA exists in every animal in the world.
10% of animals' DNA in us does not mean that we interpleaded with them.
I didn't say that.
Otherwise, we could have interpleaded with bananas.
Well, obviously you can try if you like. I don't know if you'll have much success. At the same time, that DNA string which exists in every flora and fauna on this earth, I mean, so that controls how that plant or animal grows, and whether that particular cell becomes a nose hair or a kidney hair or kidney bone, and certainly various traits that became good, like I mentioned, bipedalism, etc., cephalization, etc., tool use, and one of the other things that why did the apes lose their hair? You know, and because it became an advantage because they had to chase animals basically to catch animals, and like we sweat all over our bodies, and if we've got hair all over, it stops us from sweating and cooling our bodies. It keeps us hot.
And they started chasing animals now. That's
No,
why
in fact,
that's why
parts
they
of
keep
the-
their ears.
Oh, I think they were just designed that way to concentrate the environment. But with the DNA, you said it right, it was a miracle, you know? Academics behind the miracles.
You tell me and I'll tell you that we'll both know.
We agree on that.
You tell me and I'll tell you and we'll both know. I don't know as far to say it was created, but it's very, very difficult to think that all that happened by chance. Yeah. And there's lots of scientists, especially I'll tell you about some later, there's certain scientists that talk about the complexity of the cell. Basically they say Darwin's could not possibly be right that a cell could happen randomly. Yeah, there's lots of scientists in that boat. But anyway, of all the Homo erectus, etc., that came out of Africa, there's only one of us left, and that's us, Homo sapiens. So if I just look back at this, so this evolution was not a simple progression. And I should also mention that most fossils we find are from the ocean. They're marine fossils because they were easily preserved in the ocean. Fossils, like animals that die on land, usually they get the body rots, etc., etc. To get a fossil, you've got to have it very, very quickly and certain keep it away from oxygen so that it's in a reducing environment, etc. to form fossils. So the finding of fossils of land animals on fossils is very restricted. You know, you don't find many. Yeah. So, but anyway, just to sort of run through this again, you've got Australopithecus separated from the apes about 5 million years ago. And then you've got these various branches of Homo habilis, the first tools, and then Homo erectus. He was a bigger and better survivor than habilis, etc., through to the Neanderthals, and then right through to us. You know, what's the breakover between the Neanderthals and us? We're separate streams, really. I mean, so they came out of the side, or we came out of the side from somewhere. Pardon?
You can observe Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, may well have been, or more probably Neanderthal, you know. And believe me, there's still some Neanderthals around today because I've met them. No, don't quote me. Just another little interesting snippet I've had. We've got the global climate temperatures that happen here, which is a sort of a topical subject at the moment with climate change, which most of what you read in the paper is absolute rubbish. That's another story. And so this is the temperature of the Earth going back, 500,000 years ago, back to 1 million years ago. You've got all these very, very, very cold periods. And you've got these, what they call interglacials, these warm periods. And it's in these warm periods mostly where life really blossomed and survived. Because in the cold periods, finding food was a real tough job. And so life was very, very difficult. But as I said, Neanderthalensis came out around about 300,000, 400,000 years ago into the Middle East and then finally into Europe. But Homo sapiens, whether he came out of Rhodensis or whatever, Homo erectus, are they all separate streams of life? And they probably are. It's not just one thing. So where did we suddenly jump in on the scene from? I don't know. Did we come away from one of the other life forms, or did we come out of the left field, or whatever? And the world's temperature here was very, very cold, and where Neanderthalensis, he died out round about towards the end of the last ice age. And so he'd already survived several ice ages through here and done very, very well. He was shorter, squatter than us. He was, adept to living in really cold conditions where there was not much food. We came in much later in the period and we survived and he didn't. So this is where we are at the moment. You can see that the Earth is not as hot today as it has been in the previous interglacials. There's several different ways of doing it. One of the most reliable ones is the Vostok ice cores, where they took their cores of the ice from Antarctica, and it goes back to nearly 1 million years. And in those ice cores, you can see the seasons, and there's also gas vesicles in the ice cores and some sediments from like volcanic eruptions and stuff. And from the study of those ice cores, they're able to, I think the temperature's worked out from an isotope of oxygen, I think oxygen 16 or something. They find that's a direct link to temperature, the amount of oxygen 16. I don't know exactly, it's not my area of expertise for any stretch, but that's a well-accepted temperature curve of the Earth. And so you've got all these very cold. In fact, the Earth's more likely to be cold than it is to be hot.
Can we go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
6K years ago, why most civilizations started just like this?
Good question. I don't know. Do you know?
Of course I know.
Well, you have a supposed explanation. I don't know that I agree with it.
I do.
I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so life forms as we basically know it has started at the end of the last ice age, the last warm period. So moving on. So at the end of when this got warm, you can see it suddenly got very, very warm, and so we go here to about 1 million years ago, etc., etc. Not a million, so that's 100,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago, that's the end of the last ice age. And animal domestication, this is just picked up, about 6,000 years ago, probably cities, domestication of horses, and supposedly the pyramids came in here at about 4,500 years ago, but that's another story, they didn't. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time. And hence into the Greek society, the Romans, etc., through to industrialisation and basically where we are today. Some of them have little serrated edges along them where they really work them extremely to a high degree of skill. So his workmanship on the stone tools to making arrowheads was really very, very good. You know, I don't think I could make them today, but anyway, they tweaked out how to make them. And also in southern Libya, you find these grinding stones and grinding plates that you see there, and I've got some over there. And this is when early Homo lived together in groups, etc. So they physically collected food and ground grain, etc. They didn't just rely on hunting. They were hunters and gatherers. Probably more permanent campsites, and probably Homo erectus getting smarter. Okay, so there's some of them over there. Moving on. Out in western Egypt, the furthest water you get west of Farafra Oasis is a well called Ain Dalla. And it's an interesting well because it sits at the top of a sand dune. So don't ask me how it sits at the top of a sand dune, but it does. And around there, clearly there's been signs of early habitation around there. And you can see where they'd funneled channels from the top of the sand dune down to the thing, and they'd irrigated pasture around about there. And there's lots of pottery around there. There's some big old ovens where clearly they made pottery. And these are some of the pieces I just picked up in there. You can see this is a very primitive piece, but then you get to see these more sophisticated pieces, which are much later, where clearly they made them on a lathe and fairly high degree of sophistication. But if you look at some of those others there, you can see quite primitive workmanship on some of those others where they probably just shaped them by hand. So possibly. Correct, yes. Yes.
And we still see this then. So the stratification of the sophistication of things is not on.
Yeah, it's not a clear lineage. I mean to say the study of pottery and that in Greek and Minoan and Roman civilization is a very highly sophisticated science. I mean to say they know very, very well the ages that different pottery existed, and a lot of it didn't from the Greek and the Minoan civilizations, etc. And they correlate that to some of the pottery in Egypt, etc. So it's not an area that I know anything about, but it is a highly sophisticated area of study and expertise. Yeah. So anyway, there's some of those pieces of pottery over there. And where are you going? Oh, okay, look at this Libyan desert silica glass down in this area in southwestern Egypt. There's this, one of the remaining geological mysteries of the world, and somehow or other I didn't bring it with me, the silica glass I got over there. Must have left it at home. But anyway, you find this silica glass laying on the desert down near, what's the name of the, Gilf Kabir, yeah, down around Gilf Kabir. And I picked up a few pieces of it down there. And interestingly enough, on one of Tutankhamun's arm blazers or whatever you call them, you see a piece of the silica glass right there. And so the dynastic Egyptians had been there and seen this particular glass. The mystery is, how did it form? You know, because you got this glass sitting on this sandstone, the Nubian sandstone. But no, no, not hardly any. There's some further south, and there are a few impact craters around. But what they think has really happened, that a meteorite impact came in, but it never ever actually hit the ground, like that big one in Russia where all the trees are, you know, for thousands of acres, so they've got trees laid out. And so they think that one of the explanations is that they think this massive meteorite exploded or disintegrated above the ground. And, you know, when you compress air, it gets incredibly hot. like you pump a bicycle pump, you know, the pump gets extremely hot. So they think it melted the Nubian sandstone because the composition of this stuff is exactly the same as the Nubian sandstone on which it sits. And but it forms this clear glass. You can see flow structures in it. You can see gas vesicles in it. And studying that, and they've got a cooling history curve of it, you know, at 1,000 degrees to 800 degrees to 600 degrees, etc., etc. So it's a bit of a mystery as to how it formed. But they think it's probably due to what they call radiative melting from a large meteorite aerial blast, analogous to trinitite. I think where they set off the atomic bombs in at the start of at the end of the Second World War, you got this glass formed on the sand below, and so they call it trinitite. So they think that's what it was caused in. So anyway, maybe it's not such a mystery. And the other one is the big pot I've got over there, which is Balas. The story goes, as you head down in this part of the world, there's a big sand dune down there that's got these water pots buried in the sand. And the story goes that at the end of the date harvest, these wild boys from Kufra would head over to Karga and Dalat and Mut and steal the date harvest and take a few slaves and do a bit of raping and pillaging and then head back home with the date harvest. And it was a long haul home with the extra slaves, etc., etc. So they'd come out here and they'd buried some pots in the sand somewhere, which are these pots over here. And supposedly, as the story goes, so the boys were telling me that the boys out at Mut and Dakla and that, they got a bit shy to this, so they went out and smashed the pots and emptied the water out, and supposedly they never got home with their dates. So anyway, that big pot over there is an Abu Balas pot. You can see where it's been eroded away by the sand, where it stuck out of the sand, and it got smashed up in the hotel in town at one of the talks I was giving. So there it is there. Some 180 miles southwest of Dakla Oasis. I said means father of pots, but you were arguing with me that it means the man who carries the pot, right? But if a man was carrying that pot and was full of water, he must be an awful strong man. So anyway, the area is called Abu Balas, yeah. And there's lots of ammonites. There's a big fossil ridge down there, Jurassic fossils. The ammonites in them, there are heaps of them. Yeah, I've seen them this big, you know. So anyway, moving on. The last one I forgot to bring too were my bows and arrows that came from South America, right up in this part of western Brazil on the Rio Javari, which is the border between Peru and Brazil. We used to fly into a place called Leticia there, which is in Colombia actually, and then fly down here, and we're working in this particular area down here. And the Indians down there are called Maruni Indians. They'd basically never seen foreigners or white people before. The Brazilians were always scared to death of them, you know, because there had been lots of Indian massacres and stuff like that, but we never had any problems with them. And the boys used to trade them for their clothes, and I had some bows and arrows from there. And so these are the Mairunas, completely naked. They live in the jungle, but they have no stone tools. Anyone think why they had no stone tools? No stones, exactly. The Amazon, there's not a stone in the entire area. It's all clay. Yeah. Anyway, so these are the bow and arrows that I meant to bring with me that they used to shoot with their arrows. And the girls all stick these big spikes in their nose. I guess that's a sign of beauty. So haven't seen a lot of it going on around here, but anyway, it could take off. You see all bits of metal hanging out of some people, so maybe that's a throwback to the Indians. And so there's the arrows and bows that I meant to bring. That's some of the actual Mairunas Indians came in camp. They used to trade the boys for clothes, so they'd come in with some tatty old T-shirt. I don't know what they traded for, but anyway, they had T-shirts, and they came into camp. So these are just some of the references that I had. So any questions or etc., more than willing to try and answer them. So basically, I've just shown that there's this progression of life all the way through to where we are today. It's certainly not clear-cut. All the earlier homos are not here, and we are here. We don't really know why. And is there another Homo super sapiens waiting out there in the wings? But most species last for about 3 million years, so we're probably all right for a little while. Yes.
How sex is developed,
How?
how we got male and female
Hmm.
Homo sapiens, and what was the chance of developing a male and female in one place at just a slice of time for them to reproduce, and extrapolate that to the hundreds of thousands of other genus in the world.
I don't know. I mean, say every life form going back to the sponges and the fossils, etc., way back, they're all male and female. Some could self-fertilise. There were some animals that could self-fertilise, but everything has a male and a female.
What's the possibility of having a male and female at the same time, with the same geographic location to reproduce?
I don't know. But
Impossible.
oh, no, it's not impossible. I mean, say right back from the start of life, there was a male and a female in everything.
Yeah, and they evolved in
Yeah.
different branches
Yeah.
at different times.
Yeah.
So you need to have a male and female
Yeah.
for the spiders
Yeah.
to produce spiders.
Yeah.
Okay?
So?
And for turtles. So what's the chance of evolving a male and female in the exact same time, in the exact same location for reproduction?
I don't know. That's a question anyone can answer. I mean, to say it's all life has a male and a female. So that's just whether there's a superior. No, not at all. Whether there's a superior being up there that gave little nudges along the way, it's very possible they did. I mean, say some scientists say the complexity of a cell, is so complex that it could not possibly have happened by random chance. I mean, to say that's very possible. But and that exists in every cell, in every flora and fauna on Earth. So I'm not saying that there's. I personally believe in a superior being. Now, just how or why or when or whatever, I don't necessarily say that it happened like the Bible says it did, because there's no proof that it did, and etc. So, and life goes back, billions of years before the supposed 6,000 years of the story of the Bible, and life certainly existed long before the Bible was written. Yeah, well, that's like I said, some of the early geologists, they knew life was very old, but they couldn't figure out how old. It was only when they got to radiometric dating that they were really able to predict ages dates very accurately. And we've got the Vostok ice cores where they count back year by year, etc. So that goes back to nearly 1 million years old, the Vostok ice cores. So I'm not saying I have any answers. I'm just want to put it out there in front of you that there are many unanswered questions about evolution. There are innumerable unanswered questions about the Bible, etc. Although Father Abraham would tend to disagree. Did you have a question? Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. But the pyramids are much older than 6,000 years. That's another story. The Egyptians did not build the pyramids. But that's another story. No, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it wasn't the Egyptians. Anyway, that's another talk I can give you.
Do I have a chance to present, or you're tired?
No, by all means.
Yes, stretch your legs while we...
Well, I hope it was interesting, so raising... Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Very informative talk.
You want this thing?
Yes, please. He was talking about Egyptian timing. Now, I think we know the experience of the Australian timing. He's half an hour over his time.
I told you I had about 30 slides.
Yeah. No, but it was good. It was good.
Well, yeah, things to think about.
Yeah. And I think this would be
the second slide in my talk about the answers.
Oh, right, yeah. That's the Petroleum, we gave a talk at the Petroleum Exploration Society of Australia, PESA. We give the speakers a gift after their talk, you know. Okay. So you spoke at PESA.
Yeah, I did.
Was it PESA WA or?
Yeah, big WA. So these are the sort of things, you know, whose grubby little hands made that? Probably, you know, 300,000 years ago. There's a whole slew of these.
Well, it could have been.
More modern ones which are much better made before the glass
But that could have been made last week. We don't know, do we?
Well, I don't think it was made where I picked it up.
No, I think you may be right because while people are traveling in space, other people live in huts.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
American,
Space age,
African,
Stone Age.
South Africa. We still have people
Out in the middle of the Libyan desert, there wasn't a lot of civilization out there when I was out there in the last few 10, 18 years. And you lived there for a long time before that.
Yeah, I noticed there's a tribe of people Ammonites were a tribe, weren't they?
Ammonites.
The Ammonites.
What's the word? Where did Ammonites come from? It comes from something.
There's a tribe of Ammonites in the Bible. They fought against Israel. But I didn't think they looked like that. Yeah, but I didn't think those tribal people looked like that.
These are interesting, you know, those grinding stones. Yeah. I've seen some of those grinding stones. These big, you know, the plates. You know, it's huge. Take 2 men to lift them. You know. So, fear they didn't cart them around, but then they left them in the one area. And whether they came back there periodically to live in these camps and whatever, I don't know.
These are in the Bibles, right?
Well, I wouldn't say they're my Bible. They're some of the references I use, and amongst many other stuff. You know.
We asked Hawking sometime, give us one example of mutation that delivered smarter
And your species.
and he kept silent for 3 minutes thinking, and there was no answer.
Oh, right. You know, that's one of the arguments against evolution. That you know, what caused you to jump from one species to another? The species basically can't interbreed. You know, so that's the definition of a species. You know, like Chinese, Arabs, whatever. They're not different species. You know, we're all the same because we're all interbreed. And we interbred with Neanderthals. You know, so suppose they have 10% Neanderthal genes, so we're still Homo, same species. You know.
Yeah, I think we should start because we need to finish this quickly. I'm sorry about that. And that's why I said it is going to be a teaser because I know it's going to be short. I'll try to be fast as well. What's the difference? This is the same data, same information we start all together with, whether it's rocks, fossils, and whatever. The difference is evolution people distort the data, number one, and then add plenty of time to the data. This is their interpretation. Creation people just look at the data, think a little while, and get out of this data beautiful creation. And this is basically the difference between a trained mind and a spiritual spirit. People would love to add lots of lines and lots of time, but they don't like to look into the data as per the Bible told us. So what is the difference between theistic evolution or evolution in general and creation? It is debate over origins. So what is the origin of time and space, the origin of matter, the origin of energy, the origin of intelligence, the origin of life, the origin of morals, feelings, languages? Ask a theistic evolutionist or atheist, their answer would be, we don't know, but we are certain there is no creator. Ask any of atheists about the origin of these 8 things, they would say, no way there is a creator, but we don't know where these things come from. You ask a creationist and he would say, we know and we are certain that there is a creator, because there is no other explanation, logical explanation to have all this list without having a creator in the middle. So we have got uncertain faith, based on faith. All the things of evolution is just based on uncertain faith, alternative faith to having God. Christians would have a certain faith in their creator. So atheistic view would say everything came into existence out of nothing, without a creator. The Big Bang Theory came out of nothing. There was no space, there is no time, there is no matter, there is nothing. There was one chickpea, like sand grain, and that sand grain presented everything we know now. Time and space and matter and energy and emotion and life and everything. You know, it is like the fairy tale of frog to princess, or frog to prince. In Christian views, we say everything came into existence out of nothing, but with a creator who said, let it be light, then light came. Logic. Everything has to have a cause. Nothing could be without a cause. So the difference is they believe in ex nihilo, and Christians believe in ex nihilo. So the difference is the creator. Where would you put the creator in the equation? So origin of life is a bit amazing. There is almost 7 theories of origin of lives, and I have to remind you what a theory means. It's a hypothesis never proven. So one of them is called the primordial soup RNA, that Michael spoke about, the importance of having the RNA to develop and to unzip the DNA to produce life. And there is the simple metabolism and reactions. There's the spark, and they tried their best to, they spent few decades actually trying to find or to create life, and they said they couldn't, and they said there is no intelligent source for life, though they have tried their best intelligence to create life. Chill Bang, it is like the Big Bang, but for life. Life came out of ice, or clay breeding ground, or hydrothermal vents, or panspermia theory, that life actually came from extraterrestrial, and this is what Michael was referring to, that the pyramids are built by an ET tribe coming from space, and by the way, it's a fabricated picture. Okay, sorry, but yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the panspermia is again you are exporting your problem to another planet. You could not solve your problem on planet Earth, so there must be more smarter people on the outer space there that helped. And these people, actually, the inverted pyramids, came to check on our growth and on our safety, because they implemented the seed on Earth few million years ago. So biblical view with a scientific flavor here. We say in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is the first verse in the book of Genesis, the first ever verse in the Bible. We can say in the beginning, God created the astronomy and the geology. Moses. Yes, we have got internal proofs. We have got internal proofs and external proofs that Moses wrote Genesis. So God created man in his own image, in the image of God. He created him male and female. He created them. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. And that is Genesis 1:27, the last verse in this chapter, which means God created anthropology on the sixth day. So since the sixth day, we have got a continuous story without any gaps. Remember, remind you, the theory of evolution is the theory of gaps. The theory of creation does not have any gap whatsoever in the creation. And we're going to go explore that together. Yes, Michael? Sorry? Female God? No. On his image is a purity, holiness, intellectuality, luminous. So on his image does not mean the physical image of a male or a female. Because God is genderless. We have got a simple biblical geoanthropological time scale. I've got the creation week. Day 1 to 5, we didn't have any humans there. And day 6, God created male and female, Adam and Eve. And some people say that after 33 years of their creation, or 3.5 years of their creations, I'm not sure, Adam and Eve fell and disobeyed God. And then the pre-flood period from Adam, when he expelled from the Garden of Eden, till the birth of, or till the time of the flood, we have 1652 years according to the Masoretic version of the Bible. It is different to another version called the Septuagint. But it is not that a major problem. You can say, in evolution, they say plus or minus few billion years. We can safely say here plus or minus 500 years. So this period of time, 1652 years pre-flood, is what I call the lost civilization. And I'll come back to that. And then the flood period is 371 days, or 370 days. The difference is 1 to 2 days in our calculations. And water was covering the entire earth. So the three periods, the paradise period, the pre-flood period, there was humans living on earth, and then after the flood, or during the flood time, there was no humans. Then we have, at the end of the flood, people settling, and we have got the famous story of the Tower of Babel, of the confusion of tongues, and then the dispersion, which was referred to in the previous presentation as the Major Ice Age, and then the pre-dynastic civilization, dynastic civilization, and then the modern civilization that we live now. This period, the post-flood period, is around 5,300 years, and it is divided into BC and AD, or BCE and AD as some people, or CE as some people refer to. This is a very famous artifact in London, America, not London, England. It's called London Hammer, and they dated the limestone around the hammer, and they found the limestone is 400 million years. 400 million years. The alloy of the hammer is iron and titanium, which is not known to us how they did that 400 million years before even the apes were created. Anyways, part of the hand of the hammer actually turned into carbon, coal. How old it is, then people who lived 400 million years must be very clever. This is not a very important chart, but it shows you how we came with the 1656 years of the lost civilization from the Bible. And the lost civilization, I'd like to talk a little bit about it from culture and civilization point of view. Number one, it's actually a long period of time. Imagine now we have got to start the world from zero time. And after 1600 years, what do you think you will see? Lots and lots of technology. Imagine that you are walking in the streets of Egypt sometime around 500 BC, 1000 BC. You would see doctors, you would see medicinals, you would see builders, masons, all kinds of stuff, because they developed a lot during the 16th centuries. And according to the Bible, they lived very long times, reaching 169 years. So if you started a project now, and you have got 500, 600 years to complete your project, probably you will be able to finish that project. And they used to have one language, the Adamaic language. So there was no language barrier. They communicated with each other with one language. There was no problems in communication. And also they lived in close by communities. So they didn't need to travel or to work hard to complete their projects. And it was a cleaner environment. And also there was plenty of oxygen at that time. From the fossil record, we can say that oxygen was more than the oxygen that we have today. In the Bible, it mentions that there was around more than 85 disciplines and branches of science and technology during this lost civilization, from making tents, garments, to building arks that can accommodate for all the animals in the world, painting with tar, cutting rocks, cutting wood, everything. They didn't have any problems with the know-how. They explored for gold, for iron, and this is probably what is referred to the first mineral age and the first stone age and the first things like that. So more than 85 disciplines of science and technology was known in the lost civilization. Noah and his descendants, after they landed the ark, they traveled to a place called Shinar. Shinar is in the Mesopotamian area. Shinar means two rivers, which is referring to Degla and Euphrates. Okay, Degla is, what is in English? Okay, the two rivers of Iraq, Euphrates and we call it Degla. Okay, the Tigers. Shinar is probably the same civilization of the Sumerian civilization. Similarities, and I could show you lots of information about the Sumerian civilization and how you can get from Shinar to Sumer or Sumer very easily with the phonetics. And the Sumerian civilization was unique. They spoke a language never known before. They wrote it in a very special way, and they had libraries, and they had very well advanced technology. This is what we believe is the first civilization on planet Earth after the flood. Unfortunately, it was destroyed like this. We don't know why, according to the secular science, but we know because it was the time of Peleg, when they had lots of earthquakes and volcanoes during the Oligocene. The Sumerian language, which is the male cuneiform language, is not repeated again in history. And amazingly, you could find the Sumerian language, or similar to the Sumerian language, in places like Bolivia. How did it go to Bolivia? And the last thing in this slide is Noah's descendants started new civilizations after their dispersion. And this is what would explain why at around 6,000 years from now, or 4,000 years before Christ, all civilization prospered. The Egyptians, the Chinese, the Ethiopians, the Iraqi, the Babylonians, all of them started at the same time amazingly. And passing down the knowledge, number one, this is the common thing, is oral traditions. If grandfather would tell his grandchild what was happening in his days, but written documentation is a very important thing, because these people were very clever in recording everything. You go to chapter 5 of the book of Genesis and you find this sentence: this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. So it is a book inserted in the book of Genesis. It means that he got this information from a pre-existing document and inserted in there. And as I told you, Sumerian libraries were so flourished, they used to write on plate and clay plates and solve them in a very clever way and indexing them very well. Moses lived in the palace of the Pharaoh, and he had access to all the pharaonic documentations, and he was more than bilingual. I believe he spoke 3 languages because he lived in Egypt. He knew Aramaic or Hebrew, and he also went to Midian when he married his first, or his wife back then. So he was trilingual, very well educated, had access to the libraries of the Pharaoh's palace, and he was very smart as well. I'm sorry for the Arabic writing here, but this is the time spans of the patriarch from Adam to Jacob, and you can see that many patriarchs lived contemporaneously with Noah, and I could dare to say Adam has got many sons after Seth. Probably one of Adam's descendants, one of Adam's children, could have lived together with Noah. The difference between Adam and Seth, birth and death, is 17 years. So, sorry, between Seth and Noah is 17 years from here to here. So if Adam had another child, could have overlapped this gap, and then the direct information, or Noah got his information directly from Adam's children. However, many patriarchs lived with Noah, and could have told him everything. And this area here is the people who was contemporaneously living with Shem as well. So it takes only one link to get from Adam to Shem to get all the information of paradise and the exile and everything. And this chart here shows that between Shem and Moses was only 275 years, and you have got 2 or 3 people just overlapping this. So the handover was simple, not a big deal there. One of the great evidences of the truthfulness and ingenuity of the Bible is the pattern of migration that is told to us in the in chapter 10 and chapter 11 of Genesis. Chapter 10 is the table of nations, and very easy you can see here. This is where we had the Tower of Babel problem, where Nimrod was the one who started the building the Tower of Babel. And by the way, I think the Tower of Babel is a prototype for all pyramids that are around the world, because pyramids around the world, they are similar in the concept. And I don't know why I would have spent all this time building a huge monument like this. It is not, of course, for burial. It is not meant for burial. Probably they had other uses for pyramids. Here in China, they discovered a pyramid under one of the lakes there, I don't remember the name, which is very much older. It is destroyed and much older than the pyramids, which some people say it is pre-diluvial pyramid. So obviously the pyramids concept was there in the last civilization, and after the deluge, after the Noah's flood, they wanted to re-erect their pyramid system again. So Nimrod wanted to build that tower there, but this is not my point here. You can, for example, see the pattern of the names of the descendants of Ham, the second son, which is the brown pattern here. Ham left with his people, his descendants, and you find Salah, or in North Saudi Arabia, Seba, Sheba, Havilah, Cush, Ludim, Nabil, تسمع الوديم مدينة الوديم الدويم الدويم كسلوحيم built Kasala here Misraim built Misr, Egypt. Anamin, you know, the ancient Egyptians, Aramaic, Hebrew, and most ancient languages did not have vowels. So we have, for example, Amun, Tutankhamun. It was not Amun. It was written in the ancient Egyptian language, Amun. But we, because of the oral traditions and how people pronounce the names, we know that it was called Amun. So here we have Ananim, which is most probably Mina Narmer. Patrosim, Ham, in Psalm 105, verse 22, David, the prophet, the psalmist say that Egypt is the land of Ham. And Egypt's first name is Chemet. Chem is actually Chem, Ham. So the Bible tells us that Ham lived in Egypt and it was called after his name. Cush is one of Ham's children. And then you come here, Batrosim, which is Vetras, and Lubim, Libya, which is currently Libya. Put, Fayat, Bayad in Egypt now. And then Kaftorim, one of the grandchildren of Mitzrayim, was kicked out and lived in Crete, together with Philistine, who was kicked out from Crete and went to Israel now, or Philistine now. And the fourth son is Canaan. The model that they are trying to tell us, that the pattern of migration went through northern Sinai, but northern Sinai at the time, according to my interpretation, which is the Miocene, was covered with water and they couldn't do that. So they moved east and crossed from here to there. You have here Ophir, which is Valley of Afar in Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. Ophir actually is one of the sons of Joktan, which is Joktan, Bani Joktan in Saudi Arabia. Hadramaut is the current city in our current state in South Saudi Arabia. Now you will have Elam, Midian, you have Ashur. Actually, this area, the Levant, is called El-Shem, Shem, the other son of Noah, Shem, El-Shem, till now. So Sidon still exists. Japheth is very amazing. The only name that was called, or the only name that was said that he went to the islands, from the three children of Noah. Why? Because Europe at that time was islands covered with water during Middle Miocene. And they say that Noah traveled north east and dwelled in China and established the Chinese first empire. And the first emperor in China was called Fowa, which is very close to Noah. I don't know, I'm not sure of this, but there are references for that. What I wanted to say here before I leave this slide is during the time of this dispersion, all the continents were attached together in the southern hemisphere. That's why this area was all savanna area and bushes area. That's why we have lots of cave drawings with savanna animals. And as Michael said, that was the very populated area, and it produced wheat for the entire ancient world at the time. This is a footprint that in King Saudi Arabia 85,000 years ago. It is not any different than a Homo sapien footprint. You can check the site there. This is, why I'm showing this, to show you the rock paintings across the area, or across the pathway they took from Babel towards the south in their travel to Egypt. And because it is ancient drawings, it's not very clear, but you can see savanna animals in the area. There is here a very interesting animal. I'm not sure what is it. Very long neck. It could be a giraffe. I'm not sure. In Egypt, pre-dynastic Egypt, or what we call the Naqada civilization. The Naqada civilization was in this area between Egypt and Sudan. And this is pre-dynastic, which means they were just still going on, not settled yet, which is the Stone Age in some other terms. This area here is called, it's west of Aswan, and we have a Stonehenge thing that used to be a space observatory, like the Stonehenges in England and in Saudi Arabia. This is pre-dynastic in Stone Age. Imagine they were observing the space in a Stone Age. An interesting painting here, I don't know whether this is an elephant or two elephants, a male elephant, but it is much bigger than a normal elephant, because if you put it to scale to the cow down there, it's a huge one. Could be a mammoth, I'm not sure. But here, something very weird is going on here. What do you think this is? Let me highlight it. It's a lion attacking another giraffe. Not giraffe. Of course, this is not a giraffe. Right? What is this? It's a Brachiosaurus, basically. Brachiosaurus. And the artist was very clever that he left the bite of the lion of his image. So dinosaurs were seen by people. They could live together. We have got another dinosaur there, where St. George is. And this is another, what is this? Crocodile? Do crocodile walk on 4 legs with the legs up, or they walk on 4 legs with the legs down? This is not a crocodile, of course. But look at this. The soldier is hunting this creature. And that was probably 17th, 18th century. If this is not enough evidence to say that people used to live with dinosaurs and with other animals, this is Tabuk area, north of Saudi Arabia, which is called Midian back then, and this is Kuwait. I'm going to show you a couple of examples from Tabuk and Kuwait. What do you think this is? A giraffe? Do you think this is a giraffe? Dinosaur. And dogs or wolves attacking another dinosaur there? Strange, right? And here is, what is this? Horizontal giraffe, where dogs or wolves are attacking this dinosaur again. This actually has got 3 painting layers, and the dinosaur is the 3rd layer, the most recent layer there. In 2017 in Kuwait, they discovered this cave painting. So interesting, so interesting. This gentlemen here, or I don't know, it could be ladies, are herding bulls and cows. This one here is spearing or hunting. Of course not, he's lazy. He's hunting these 2 weird things here. What are they? Dinosaurs, right? Could they be anything else? What? Aliens. And you have got here, they are partying. This one I believe would be, I'm not sure, four-legged dinosaur. And here they were partying. This is a pot over fire, and relaxing and probably a dancing girl. I'm not sure, but it is really a nice scene, recently discovered in Kuwait, 2017. When I went to Egypt in last year in February, I went and checked the pre-dynastic Egyptian section. And guess what? These are gold with diorite, and they use this for decoration. And these beads, they were very clever in creating, artifacts. And they were also clever in having fun. Small animals, a dagger with a gold-plated hand, and all of the hippopotamus or something like this. And this is pre-dynastic. Imagine how much technology and skills they put in producing such things. And again, these are some of the toys and monuments and birds and Homo sapiens thinking there. Pots, small pots there for perfumes and for makeup. This is before the first dynasty in Egypt. And the new gold, the extracted gold, the new geology and mining and metal formation. It's very advanced, the pre-dynastic Egyptians. And again, how could I, who lives in not settled in environment and community get this very spherical head with primitive tools. Actually, let me say something about this. A couple of years now, they discovered in Ethiopia, in Lake Tana, a pyramid similar to the pyramids of Egypt that is much older than the pyramids of Egypt, under the water. And there are containers in that pyramids, or around the pyramids, I'm not sure, that contains a liquid that yet they did not define what the liquid is. But everything they put in the liquid, it dissolves. Very strong acid. Hopefully they will reveal to us what is that. Again, this is some of the artifacts in the museum. This one here, I was so amazed. It's brass statue, and they connected each piece of the statue with nails and bullets in a very sophisticated mechanism. I don't think if we know how to replicate that again. This is how it was supposed to look like, but it's another statue of brass, but this is what's left of this, and you can see the nuts and bullets there. And this is the famous shield of Mena Narmer, the one who unified Egypt. But let me ask you, what are these two animals who are hugging each other? Again, dinosaurs, right? So we together with the group of the BGG, we developed what we call the Bible Geoanthropological Time Scale, or as suggested, the BGATS. And I will not bother you with all the details, but it is compared to the geological time scale, but on a biblical scale. And we tried to understand how the events of the Bible worked in geology, still under development, but through this technique, we will manage to discover lots of resources in Egypt and in Libya. And that is my presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions? Got few charts there. You can check them on how tight the ages of the Bible, that there is no gaps between the ages of the Bible from Adam to the 19th century. Of course, the Bible does not date after the 1st century, but you can check on that. And a couple of posters there, how the archaeology supports the Bible, and how the Bible is the eyewitness to our lives and to our world. When God created the world, He gave us the manifesto, the manual for the world to understand. So people throw doubts on the Bible. They have been doing that for the past few hundred years, but still the Bible every day is proving right. One of the few studies actually for the mitochondria said that mitochondria is traced back to one male origin and 4 female origins. So we had 4 mothers and 1 Y, 1 father. Because the Y does not change, so Noah passed it down to his 3 children. However, we have 4 mothers, that is Noah and the 3 wives of his children. And another study, again on genetic and the DNA, say that all the creation, or all the species in the world, has maximum life of 200,000 years. And 90% of them has got, it's someone called Mark who did this study, 90% of this, it was done on 5 million specimens. 90% has got one father and one mother, or one male father and one female mother, and 10% probably are the clean animals that Noah took with him on the boat. So 90% was unclean animals, 10% was clean animals, and they all go back to not more than 200,000 years. And Mark and Ital was very reluctant to publish this paper because it would disappoint all those who believe in evolution and deep time. Actually, there is another, but I wouldn't bother you. There's lots of good studies now to say that the radioactive age dating is exaggerated because they did not take in account the water content of the aqueous environment of the media, and also the repetitive heating of the same material. Someone, I've got his presentation here, say that radioactive material rework itself every time there are volcanoes. So when it shows me, say, for example, 70,000 years, when it is subjected to another episode of volcanoes, it would show me 2 million years. Another episode of volcanoes, it would show me 10 million years. However, it does not say that. Radioactive age dating is completely faulty because they rely on 4 assumptions. Number 1 assumption, that is the system is sealed. We don't have a sealed system in the world. Number 2 assumption is we know the mother element. We don't know how much was the mother element. Number 3, we assume that all the elements in the sample is created by, the daughter element of the sample is created by decay. This is not true. Number 4 assumption is that the decay rate is constant, which again is not true because we managed to alter the decay rate in the labs. So we cannot rely on 4 assumptions to create facts. So the DNA is working for the benefit of the creation. The radioactive age dating now is very doubtful. The recent study suggests that we got the light, the age of the universe is wrong by 2.4 billion years. And they said, finally, we got it right. It is not 13.7 billion years. It is only 11.3 billion years. They slashed 17 to 18% of the age of the universe. So every time they change their mind according to their researches, we appreciate that. But our Bible is our rock. Never it changes. Thank you again. Any questions, Michael?
You go on. You make lots of statements about ages, but you back it up with no facts or thing. You just make these statements that this is this age, this was that age. This one moved here, that one moved there, without any factual backup whatsoever.
You may be right, but I think the rock paintings and the cave drawings speaks for themselves that people lived with dinosaurs. So, okay, then what do you think they are? This is the difference between blind faith and certain faith. You don't know lots of answers. We believe that we know all the answers because we have got the Bible. If we see?
We see no dinosaur fossils after the KT boundary. The KT boundary of dinosaur system.
This is wrong. This is wrong, I'm sorry. There are dinosaur fossils up to the Miocene. Then what? Okay, let me show you. I hope.
I don't think you agree. You have to agree to disagree.
Of course, of course. No, I appreciate the amount of knowledge that Michael has got. And I know that reading for Hawkins would, of course, affect his way of thinking, and reading the Bible would affect my way of thinking. I tend to believe in God rather than Hawkins. This is how I am. But you are free to believe in whatever God you want. I didn't say that. Most who believe in evolution are atheists. Most. Okay, maybe some of them. Theistic evolution, yes. Theistic evolution say yes, there is God. But atheistic evolution, yeah. So if I believe in God, I believe in His book, I believe in His messenger. Jesus said to us on this account that if you believe in Moses, you must believe in me. So if you don't believe in Moses, this is the words, the exact wordings of Jesus. If you do not believe in Moses, you don't believe in me. So we have to think, is it only the Old Testament that we are not convinced with, or that will jeopardize our faith in the New Testament? And he said so many quotes. I wrote a full book on Moses in the New Testament. So many quotes from the creation. In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve. That is Jesus saying this. So if I don't believe in this, I don't believe in what Jesus says, which is really concerning. So if I doubt one of his words, I should doubt everything else he did for me.
For by him, and this is Jesus, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Colossians chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. So there's no mention of evolution in the Bible, but there's many references to God being the maker of heaven and earth, numerous, and Jesus himself created.
Thank you very much, yes. I think to keep the time simple, I know we will have lots of discussion about this issue, because again it's a huge thing. It is the two camps are based on faith. There is no science in this. When I say I don't know about anything, then it's not science. It is based on faith. I appreciate and I respect everyone's faith on this, but what makes me a bit, not very content is when I say this is science. There is two types of science. Science that I can do in the lab, I can observe with my eyes, and there is historical science. We studied in geology, historical geology. So historical geology is like forensic science. It's up to interpretation. It's scientific interpretation, but it could vary from one world's view to the other world view. I hope that we can continue this faithful discussion and strong discussion. I'm very happy to have Franco with us tonight.
What to say? I'm a bit at a loss. Getting old, loss of hearing. And I've been asking myself questions fairly regularly. How did God come into being? Are we going to answer that? And he created the sun to save the world. I find it so difficult just in I don't know what to say. I would love to believe, but unfortunately, maybe my father and mother should have called me Thomas.
Franco, you are talking with frankness.
And I don't know. Again, the scientists, they say about this Big Bang. But what brought the Big Bang about? I don't know. But it's a beautiful world, and I want to enjoy it as much as I can.
Thank you, Franco. But to answer your question, well, very simple and logical. There is two laws of nature. The first law of nature is the law of causality. Everything has got a cause to get existed. This bench was made by a carpenter, and so on. But the other law of nature is called the aggressive regression fallacy, which means if I add 1 to infinity, to be infinity. If I add 100 to infinity, it would be infinity. If I add infinity to infinity, it would be infinity. So you cannot add anything to the first cause. There must be a first cause for everything. This is what is called also the first mover. For this is, laws of Newton. To move a thing, you have to have a cause to move the thing. If you don't apply the force, it won't move. So God is the first cause, according to the logical and explanation that you cannot add to infinity anything else. It will still become infinity. Right? But I cannot say that this bench came out of nowhere. It descended from the Big Bang. And the Big Bang created time and space. It's easier for me to believe in a creator than just blind, purposeless, and headless operation that's called evolution. Theistic evolution believes that God causes the evolution to happen, which is good. But it contradicts with the givings of the Old Testament and the New Testament. So there is, as Jesus said, you cannot get fig from an olive tree, or you see, you cannot. Fig tree will give you figs. Olive trees will give you olives. Horse will beget horse. It won't beget a lion. This is, at least, I understand, of course, Michael's concerns.
I mean, say, infinity is just a concept that we have. No one knows what infinity is. I mean to say, it's just something out there that we know mathematically exists. Okay, that is infinity God? Is infinity not God? You can't say.
No, we believe that God is infinite. This is what we believe.
But what does that mean? God is infinite. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything.
He doesn't have a beginning nor an end. He's the first cause.
Yeah, but I mean to say, the causal theory comes out of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rerum Novarum, and these 9 proofs, or, how do you put it? They're not proofs, they're sort of, what do you call them? I forget the existence for the existence of God, some of which are proved to be wrong, of course, subsequently, but the first mover is one of his prime hypotheses, yeah.
Well, I didn't get anything out of my mind, just from other people who I appreciate and believe in. Thank you very much. I think it was a very healthy discussion. And forgive me if I came across tough or anything like that.
To raise questions, I meant to say, no one knows all the answers.
Yeah. God knows.
Well, maybe he does. I don't know. I haven't met him.
I'll send you to him now. تفضلوا نصلي. Mark, can you pray for us?
I think so.